It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. You tune into your Feel Good Breakfast Show Expresso right here on SABC 3. It's your Wednesday morning and it's time for another edition of our Wednesday feature where we focus on the unconventional side of the law. It's called So Now What? Hey, and we're joined once again by our expert lawyer and director at legalease.co.za, Eitan Stern. And of course, the story is one of the Expresso team members, well, they're looking into purchasing a property for the very first time, but is completely overwhelmed by the amount of red tape involved. So hopefully this morning we can simplify the process, at least from a legal perspective. Okay. Eitan, how's it going, man?
It's going well. It's a big task which you're setting out to simplify this process.
It's a big task, man.
I'm up for it. Let's try it.
Look, it's such a complicated thing.
Yeah.
Why is it that exchanging property, that two people cannot exchange property in the way that we would, for example, exchange a guitar when we sell each other like things online?
Exactly.
Okay, so immovable property has always been dealt with differently in the law, and it's pretty much for two reasons. Number one, it's extremely valuable, whereas guitars are less valuable. And number two, it's because a guitar is only relevant to the two of you, but property is relevant to everyone. The state needs to know what levies they have to pay, and other people need to know who owns this, the land. So it has to be registered because it's not just relevant to the owners, it's relevant to the whole society.
Yeah, understandably so. I mean, I get it. You know, it's like you said, an immovable property is something that's there. It's something that grows in value as well, and it needs to be measured somehow as well. So what are the bare minimum legal requirements when buying a property? And I mean, what is the process to kind of, just in a nutshell?
So the bare minimum requirements, there has to be an offer to purchase, which must include the parties selling, the details of the property and the price. And then there's a process that gets kicked underway, and it's called conveyancing or transferring of a property. And, you know, the bond has to be registered. If there's going to be a bond over the property, so if you're borrowing money from the bank, the transfer has to be registered with the deeds office. There has to be the certificates. There has to be a bug certificate to make sure that the house is bug-free. There has to be an electrical certificate. And the municipality has to make sure that there's no outstanding levies or taxes owed. So this whole process has to happen, and only then, once that's finished, can the property be transferred.
So where do lawyers come into this then? Because it sounds like you would need lawyers if you have all these agreements and certificates. You might need someone to facilitate the process.
Okay, so lawyers come into it, and that generally you have a lawyer that takes care of this process. It's a specific type of lawyer called a conveyancer, and they are the ones that kind of run you through this whole process. And it's quite important for there to be a lawyer because it's a very, very formalistic process. And if any of the steps are not 100% correct, the transfer won't happen. And again, when you're spending your life savings on a property, you really want it to be done properly. And also generally because the banks are involved, because they're lending money, the banks want to make sure that it's done properly. So they trust the most trustworthy people in society, us lawyers.
Exactly. Conveyance lawyers. Now, I want to get to that because obviously you're setting out to buy a property. It's a big financial kind of commitment that you're making. But you know, what do the lawyers charge? Because you have to keep that in mind as well with this process.
Why is it so expensive?
Why is it so expensive, Eitan?
Okay, so essentially, it's expensive. Well, anything is only expensive as society lets it be. Art is expensive for no unreal reason. So legal fees have always been expensive, and in my opinion, they should be brought down. But why is it expensive? Well, because again, it's a very formalistic process, and it has to be done right. And there's many steps involved in it. It's not necessarily the lawyer's fault that it's expensive. It's the entire system that doesn't work properly, that it's a complex process. And lawyers are just a cog in this very complex system. So in order to make it cheaper, they really could do it, but the system would have to be fixed. The taxes on which you're paying, because a lot of that money you're paying to transfer property is also tax. That whole system could be made cheaper, and that could bring the price down. And in some countries it has. In the UK, for example, it costs you about 250 quid in order to transfer a property.
Really?
Yeah, it's very possible. I was at a tech conference last week in Switzerland with entrepreneurs from around the world, and some people are working on really interesting systems to try bring the price of property transfers down. So it's possible, it just has to be instituted.
Well, that's fantastic. You're still here with us. We've got part 2 of this conversation going on. It's Eitan Stern here on your Feel Good Breakfast Show. If you've got any questions about buying or selling property from a legal perspective, please do ask those on social media. We've still got them here for a while. And the hashtag is Expresso Show. You're not going anywhere, Eitan. We need you. We need you.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Well, if that property buyer show has got you inspired to buy your first home or even your second one, and you want to find out what exactly the process is of getting that legally done from a legal perspective, then you are in luck, because Eitan Stern is still here. He's our in-house legal expert, and he's got all the gems to share.
All the gems to share. And it's such an interesting process because, like we've unpacked, you know, there's so much going involved. It's such a process. We spoke about, you know, the fees that lawyers charge and why they charge so much, because it is a very particular process and lots needs to happen and it needs to be done right. Now, I need to ask you this as well. Can this whole process be done without lawyers?
Okay.
You know, is there a way, if some people might be, okay, cool, can I cheat the system? Can I, you know,
save money here?
You know, can you do the legal legwork without a lawyer?
So, unfortunately not. You need to be a registered conveyancer in order to do that process of transferring the property. So in order for that to happen, we would need to have the system change a little bit to allow for that. So in theory, it could change to that, and in some countries it has, but in South Africa, you still need a conveyancer in order to convey that property.
A lot of home buyers will meet with an estate agent before they get to meet with a notary or a conveyancer. Where do the estate agents fit in?
Okay, so estate agents, that's a part of the process which you could cut out. So estate agents, their job is to help you buy or sell a property. They're like a middleman in the transactions. They're just helping you to find it. You could cut the estate agents out if you wanted to, and there's some great websites now which make it easier to buy a property. But once the property is sold, once the deal is signed, the estate agents kind of fall out of the picture, and then they just recoup their payment once this transfer goes through. But so estate agents, but like a restaurant, you know, you could cook dinner at home yourself, but it makes it a little bit easier just to go eat out.
Okay.
So they basically go about, you know, if it's a bond that I'm just referring to my own kind of situation, you know, they were the ones that helping you find you a bond originator, but it's just that they play a facilitating role.
For sure, and you can do all of that stuff yourself, and there really are some great options out there in South Africa that have used technology and, you know, different apps in order to make this process a lot simpler. So you can approach the banks yourself. There's companies there's bond originators you can approach yourself. You can now sell your place online because of the different websites. And that can bring down certainly if you're the seller, that can bring down your profits a bit more.
What are some of the other frequently asked questions that you get from a legal perspective from people looking to buy a home that you need to make sure before you leave this show that people know?
Okay, so the one thing just I want to cover is the legal fees. You know, the taxes that you have to pay. That's kind of a given, and unfortunately you can't help tax.
Okay.
But the legal fees, that's set on a tariff, and so lawyers have a guideline on what to charge. So if you go into a lawyer, the lawyer has the prerogative to pull their fees below or above tariff. It's very important that you go and look at what the tariff is to make sure that the fee is not above tariff. And it is always worth asking the lawyer to bring their fees down. Lawyers need to be competitive, and so they can bring the fees down, and so it's always worth asking.
Where would you be able to check these tariffs? I mean, if you're I don't know where to go.
You can check it online if you just Google what I've probably got a link. We can try post it in the show notes if you do that. Or what we'll do is maybe we'll post it onto the Legalese Facebook group, so you can check that out. And then we will post what the tariff is so people can have a look at it. But it's always worth asking. It's a great thing to do to buy property because that means you own where you live. It means you don't have to deal with the rent, and you're like investing in something. So it's a great thing to do. But always be very cautious when you're doing it because it's a big investment. And you know, try to bring down the costs as much as you can with the lawyer's fees.
Exactly. There's so much more I can ask, Eitan. Thank you very, very much.
Pleasure.
We have unfortunately run out of time, but if you have an interesting legal conundrum that has you asking, so now what? Make sure you share it with us at Expresso Show, and maybe we'll cover it in future segments as well. Eitan, really, as always, appreciate your input, man. Very, very interesting stuff indeed.
Only a pleasure.